Really devastating news obviously shook the world last weekend with the horrible attacks that happened worldwide. Of course, one of the main focal points in Paris, which left 128 people dead and numerous injured. So we have Shane Fazen on here from FightTips and obviously joined by Jason Rubin. We wanted to kind of take this clip in a different route and talk about some of the circumstances that many of these people were in the situations, some of which we know weren't in, but we can still touch on, to try and potentially put forward a state of mind and some tips, basically, on how people, if they are in such an awful situation, could potentially, if they're thinking in the right frame of mind, because let's have full discretion here, a lot of tips, a lot of training can be said into these things, but when you're in that situation, you hear from the stories of the victims that are involved, it's just a survival mode. You're just on, it's instinct to try and get out or to get into a place of safety. And who can blame anyone for doing that? That's just what your body is telling you to do in that time when you're under immediate danger. But I'm really interested to talk to Shane about this.
Most people want to learn, if someone has a gun to my chest, how do I disarm them? How do I make them do a flip? And, you know, like it looks like a Jason Bourne movie or something like that. And many people, once I probably start talking about what I'm going to talk about, they're going to exit the video. Whereas this is the most important thing, because if you're not in the right mindset, you're not going to be able to disarm someone.
Yeah.
And my suggestion is you type in KALI, Kali, that's a knife fighting defense. Look for a place nearby where you can train that, or Krav Maga is another one. Look for places like that. If that's really what you're looking for is how to disarm someone with a gun or with a knife, then you have to train that, right? You're not going to get into the boxing ring and fight a pro boxer and beat him because you watched a couple of YouTube clips. You have to train these things. But what I want to talk about really is you have to get into the right state of mind. Now, there's an old Marine, he's deceased now, but he wrote about different stages of threats. Jeff Cooper, and he called it the Cooper color code system, and it went white, yellow, orange, red. White being the least amount of threats, no threat, and then red being the fight itself.
Yeah.
So it really, you have to, I talk to my wife about this a lot, and I ask her, I'm like, am I paranoid, or am I just really prepared? Because, I mean, I run a YouTube channel, my job, my company is all about self-defense, and I think about it all the time, and I'm studying topics, and I'm watching videos, and I sort of do obsessed over it. Like, I'll tell people I don't wear headphones when I'm outside because I want my senses, I want my hearing. I don't want someone to be able to sneak up behind me and attack me. Does that make me paranoid? No, I think that makes me just prepared. So white is when you're in your house, doors are closed, locked, windows are shut, and there's no threat, no potential threat. However, when you're sitting there drinking a beer, watching TV, this is also when someone could break in through the window in your back room, come in and attack you, and you're not prepared for it, right? You're standing face to face with a burglar. You got to be able to go from 0 to 60. But if the second that you are outside, this is called the yellow stage now. This is when you go outside, or not even. This is when you unlock your door to go outside. Yeah. Right? Now there's a way for people to come in. There's potential threats outside. This is kind of a state that you always need to be in, but it's impossible. You know, whether you sit down somewhere to eat, again, example with my wife, we'll sit down to eat, and the hostess will sit us down, they'll say, and my wife will be like, which seat do you want to sit in? And I'll always pick the one that's closer to the wall, so my back's to the wall. And the reason being is so no one can sneak up behind me. And it sounds paranoid, but it's just so I can scan what's happening in front of me. Yeah. I mean, it sounds paranoid up until you remember that there was a guy on a Greyhound bus that chopped someone's head off, literally chopped someone's head off just because he was crazy. Yeah. He was getting off the bus and stabbed someone, and no one knew to do anything, but they were in the front seat. He came up from behind, whereas if you were in the back seat and you were watching it happen, you could probably prevent that. Yeah. But if you can see these things happening, so that's the code yellow. Orange is, also, before we get to orange, is you need to judge books by its cover. You know, so many people say you shouldn't do that, you got to be nice to people, but as long as you're keeping it to yourself and you're just looking around, you're looking for shady-looking people, or someone drops a box or something like that, there's nothing wrong with you tapping a policeman or calling 911 and saying, just check it out. Yeah. Just check it out, right? Because if they're not doing anything wrong, that's fine. Yeah. They'll let them go. If they are doing something wrong, then you just saved potentially hundreds of people's lives, including yourself. Yeah. Orange is seeing a threat and acting on it, right? Now, this doesn't even mean fighting. Maybe it means someone pulls a gun on you. Maybe they pull a gun on someone you love or someone else, but it's even just alerting someone. It's not being a deer in headlights. And you have to program your mind to be able to do that. Okay, so that's where martial arts training comes in. That's where just mental preparation and thinking about this all the time, because many people see things happening online. They see an old lady get attacked. They hear about these terrorist attacks. And they're like, man, if I was there, I would have. You could have, but Would you really in that state?
Yeah.
You know, it's very easy to say, but you need to prepare for that, and you need to make a promise to yourself right now, even just watching this video, am I going to do something in the heat of the moment, right? Because if you make that promise to yourself and promise, you call up your loved ones and you tell them, I'm gonna do this. You make it a burden on everyone. You promise everyone that you're gonna stick up for people.
Yeah.
Then you're more inclined to do so. Red is the fight. That's when the fight goes down, and you need to act accordingly. You need to be a wolf, not a sheep.
This is such a good conversation to have in amongst the chaos of what's going on in the world, right? And this is, I'm not going to get into any politics of it. I'm not going to get into anything else. But when you go on Twitter and you see the political mudslinging of this, like, oh, if they all had guns, or if they all had this, like, this is a type of discussion that you think those in the positions of power could have. Have civilians who are involved in I know every area, no area is free from threat, I think, at the moment in this world we're living in. And I think that it is an accurate and it would be a very good suggestion to start informing people, kids, adults who want to learn more. So think about ways to deal with situations like this. Just because you're not in Paris at the moment, or you're not in Kuwait, or you're not in these specific areas, doesn't mean that this cannot happen on your doorstep. And I'm not saying that to threaten people. Like, you read the testimony from the girl on Facebook who was like, you never think it's going to happen to you. And then when you're in that moment, it's already happened, and you haven't been able to process the possibility that it can happen, and therefore you're left defenseless. And you don't just need to have a gun to feel like you can defend yourself. Like, you can think about rational ways to try and not just help someone who's next to you, or help someone else in that situation. If you've scanned the area and you see there's an exit there and something like that happens, well, okay, I can direct some people towards that exit. I can lay my body on top of, like, it brought tears to my eyes when I was reading the Facebook statement of the young girl who left her jersey, her shirt out, and talked about how that exact testimony, she didn't think it was going to happen to her, and she was like, there was a stranger next to her who laid his body over her to try and stop. Like, that is someone thinking critically in that moment, who's thinking, okay, what can I do to try and assist this situation? And that, I'm not saying, like, you can't blame anyone for reacting in that state, because you just don't know. I can talk about it here, but if you train people, you're going to increase the percentage and possibility of someone making a life-changing decision in that moment.
Shane, you mentioned that keep it to yourself, that judgment. Look, we live in a world where no one's free of judgment.
Yeah.
Whether you're in your own head or you're saying it out loud, obviously societal observations happen. And the quick example of that is the first time you see somebody out the day, you're immediately thinking, well, what's that person wearing? Does the person look? That's just normal for anybody. But you're not paranoid, you're passionate about what you do. That's a good thing. And you're obviously prepared if anything were to happen. But one of the important things that I always feel is left out in these conversations is that if you do see any kind of shady character or something that you were actually really fear that the situation could get worse, you're not at fault if you call the police and they find nothing of it. There is no penalty for that. You don't get arrested. You don't get fined if simply looking out for your neighbors in that type of aspect. And a lot of people don't know that. They think if they call the police because they're judging on a situation that they're wrong about, that they're going to get in some kind of trouble. And that's not true. What will happen is they'll come, they'll assess the situation. You've done pretty much one of the best things you could have done in preventing maybe something from happening. And if it turns out to be nothing and you made the wrong call, then a simple apology, you're not at fault.
I wanted to move on to another part of this. So we see instances like the bombing that went on outside the stadium in France, the Stade de France, and I think, to be honest, the President of France made an accurate decision in the moment to try and allow for that play to go on, to keep everyone focused on that, to prevent any sort of stampede, any sort of rushed emergency exit, which could just cause an enormous amount of problems as well. Outside of that, we see that there was a lot of these situations happen in areas that are very crowded, and as soon as chaos strikes, that situation becomes potentially deadly, where people, not just for those that are obviously committing the atrocity, but for those that are trying to escape and maybe thinking, like, just not able to think clearly in your mind in that chaotic moment. Do you know if there's any places where people can go that they want to enlighten themselves potentially to something like crowd problems, where the best actions to take when it's chaotic in a crowd or something like that?
Well, like I said earlier, Krav Maga is the best martial art for public safety. This is the only martial art that will teach you to headbutt, to bite, to kick to the groin, weapon defense and stuff like that. So if that's really what you're looking for, I recommend that everyone do it.
Yeah.
Male, female, old and young. Krav Maga is great. Talking about crowd defense, if you were to get, you know, attacked by a bunch of people, the very basic of that is keep your head covered.
Yeah.
You watch these street fight videos, compilation videos, one swift kick to the head or even a punch to the jaw and the guy's out, and who knows what they're going to do with you at that point. And it's scary because a lot of these fights, they don't stop until people break it up. They'll continue hitting them.
Yeah.
And every hit after that, after they're unconscious, is brain damage and death potentially. So keep your head covered. If you go down to the ground, which is no good, keep your head covered and practice this at home. Practice standing up from, you know, sitting on your butt without using your hands. Practice it from an Indian sitting position. Practice it from laying flat on your back. See if you can get up without using your hands at all, keeping your head protected, and then just create distance. Just a straight arm push to create distance from people, and then also, you mentioned exits. Know where your exits are. Get to that point.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that is useful information for those who are in those situations. And of course, all of our thoughts go out to everyone affected by just a disastrous day, which was Friday the 13th. There's there's some tools there that potentially you could use. We hope that this video has been informative. Make sure to check FightTips' channel over there. Thanks again, Shane. Thanks, Jason. And come back to TYT Sports.